Hey YouTube, Ryu here. Alright, so time for part 2 of the how WoW lost its WoW factor. Um, so let's get right into it. Area design. Now, with vanilla World of Warcraft, they didn't really have to do anything too spectacular because it was a new game. So I'll agree, some of the vanilla World of Warcraft areas were kind of boring. I mean, in retrospect. But when you were first experiencing them, when the game was still fresh, it was one of those things where there were some pretty cool looking areas, some pretty interesting areas, some downright creepy areas, some absolutely gorgeous areas. They kind of ran the whole spectrum. But one thing that I noticed was all of the Horde towns were really hard to get around in if you were a raiding party. I'm talking about the major cities. The little outposts were a completely different story. They were fairly basic. But then when you looked at the Alliance cities, well, that was a big problem. Let's go ahead and take Stormwind, for example. Stormwind, if they managed to get past that front gate, which wasn't hard because there was hardly any guards, but if they went ahead and got past that front gate area, then they would end up going ahead and basically being able to wreak havoc anywhere. You know, they could go in, they could... I mean, you had the bank right there, so they could go ahead and screw all that up, like, no time flat. They could go into the auction house, basically shut the auction house down. I mean, all right there, right in the front. It would take a little bit more doing for them to go ahead and take down the guild center. And it would take a little bit of doing to go ahead and get to some of the crafting areas. But, I mean, there were relatively few guards compared to Horde towns, like Thunder Bluff or whatever it was. I mean, there you had to go up an elevator, which was a long elevator ride. They had plenty of time to get people up to that front gate. There was no surprising on that. Not unless you had a bunch of rogues go in first in stealth, start causing mayhem, and then have your people go up. I know that there was a side path that you could go up to it, but, I mean, again, that was a very long path, very exposed. They were going to see you coming. Not to mention, if you went up the elevator, when you came out right there, you had tons of guards just sitting there waiting. You also had the griffins down at the bottom. So basically, going up the side path was the only way to avoid getting hit by those griffins. How would you get hit by the griffins in Stormwind? Oh, yeah, you would have to go running up a set of stairs specifically going for it. Really? Not to mention you had a transportable little outpost. Very, very, very close. I mean, a very short run distance away from the main city. So even if you manage to take out the griffins to go to the city, to keep people from getting out, I mean, there were people right there that could just jaunt right over. No problems for them whatsoever. You also had the Undead City. Going in there, it was kind of like the Dwarven City, except for the fact that the Dwarven City was a bunch of hallways that went out, and it was very blocky, very square, very easy to get around in. However, the Undead City, the thing was a giant maze. Even if you knew your way around, you could still kind of get lost. Now, that's a big issue in and of itself. You know, they had definitely a very big preference for defense there. But then you also had the, battlegrounds. The battlegrounds, they were pretty lackluster. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of those battlegrounds took very little effort to make. I see more interesting battlegrounds in indie games. Hell, I see more interesting battlegrounds in Minecraft. So, let's just be honest here. They done fucked up on that. Yeah, and it was surprising considering all of the design and thought that went into the areas where you're sitting there grinding and all that. Yet you end up in a situation of having lackluster cities for one side, and then just overall lackluster battlegrounds for PvP. Now, I know that I'm bitching about PvP right here, and I wasn't much of a PvPer. I'll go ahead and admit that right now. I wasn't really big into PvP. I would go into PvP matches every once in a while just for the fun of it. But I never went into PvP expecting to win. Because as soon as I would see, 2 orc warlocks on the other team, I'm like, yeah, we're pretty much boned. Because these two, if they stick together, they can go ahead and guard the objective. If it was capture the flag. If it was capture the point, all they had to do was have an orc warlock at each one. And, I mean, right there's the split for the alliance. They're basically able to hold the other, and they still have all of their other characters that they can go ahead and move around. And all they have to do is take 2. And they win. So that was one of those situations where it got very frustrating to be on the Alliance. I mean, even on Alliance teams that were communicating and so on and so forth. I know it was a lot rarer for Alliance teams to communicate and strategize and work together. But, yeah, I mean, you had some issues when it came to that. And a lot of people are going to sit there and try to say, oh, well, you were playing as an Alliance character, don't blame us because you suck, LOL noob. No, it wasn't even that. I had Horde characters. But I preferred to play as Alliance because the players in the Alliance tended to be much more accepting, much nicer, much more forgiving if you did make a mistake, whereas with the Horde, it was this, ravenously, almost special ed rage that you would get if you made even the slightest mistake. This hyper-competitiveness. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, that definitely had a factor. And I understand why it happened. I mean, with the Alliance, you had, just with the aesthetics alone, you're going to have a different mindset. I mean, I noticed myself getting more aggressive if I played as Horde than if I played as Alliance. So there was something going on there. But I played as the Horde and I played as the Alliance. And I played in PvP. I had characters who were similar level, if not exact same level, equally geared out. And as the Alliance, it always felt like an uphill battle. It always felt like swimming against the tide. But as the Horde, if we lost, it was, alright, who was AFK? Yeah. Why did we have 3 people AFK? We only lost by a few points. If you hadn't been AFK, we would have won. Whereas with the Alliance, if someone went AFK, it was an instant loss. I mean, unless you had some next level players that were using exploits. I mean, it was very difficult for the Alliance to win. Now, there were some Alliance groups that would go in and just raffle stomp. But if they went up against a similar skilled group, the Alliance more than not would lose the fight. So, I mean, there were definitely some balance issues there. But I'm not going to really go off on that again too much. At this point, we're talking about design of the battlefields and different areas. It definitely felt like the Alliance towns were much easier to invade. There was less defense. And they were easier to traverse, period. Now, that's actually going to segue me into the next big issue. Blizzard did not do a good job of picking its server admins. The server admins were very one-sided. And I know this for a fact because on my server, there was a situation where the Horde actually ended up basically shutting down Stormwind for like 2 days. And it wasn't like the Alliance didn't try to force them out. But they just had characters rotating in constantly. We could not get them out. And they shut down Stormwind for damn near a full day. We were trying to get the admins to tell them, hey, you need to back off. Now you're hurting the game. Now you're keeping people from playing the game. This is not what is supposed to go on. The admins wouldn't step in. They basically told us to stop bitching. So then, the Alliance managed to pull off quite the feat. About 3 weeks later, we decided, you know what, fuck it, we're going to go ahead and take the fight to them. We ended up shutting down the bluff for an hour. After that hour, the admin told us that if we didn't get out of there, that we were going to get banned. Well, we figured, you know what, no, that's bullshit. That's an idle threat. So we stayed. We kept fighting. And half an hour later, all of a sudden, people started getting logged off. And all of a sudden on forums, you could see people saying, hey, my account got banned. My account got banned. And all of these people were from my server. All of them were currently there fighting. Keeping that Horde city on lockdown. Just like they had done to us for an entire day. A full 24-hour lockdown. We were there for an hour and a half. And our people started getting banned. The admin then told us again, if you don't get out, we're going to keep banning you. And it wasn't like a little half-hour ban or something like that, or a forced teleport. Oh no, it wasn't anything like that. They didn't do that. These were 2 and 3 week bans. And the reason for the bans? There was no reason. It was left blank. Now, people can sit there and say, oh, well, that was the admin on your server. Well, the thing is that happened on several servers, actually. I played on several servers. I played on a PvP server, and I played on 2-player versus environment servers, because I had friends on each one. I had a character by the same name on each server. And the thing is that happened on multiple servers, different days, and it wasn't the same admin. So, please explain. If you're one of those people trying to defend it, please explain. And don't say, oh, poor little Alliance character got banned. Because the thing is the Horde would purposely go out and grief other players. Just sit there and keep them from doing things. Would go out and harass the lower level players. Would just show up and boom, on that PvP server. But then as soon as we started doing it to their low level players, all of a sudden a threat of a ban. So you can't tell me that there wasn't preferential treatment. And this was multiple servers. Now, if it only happened on one, alright, maybe it was one rogue. But no, it was not a rogue admin. This was actually the norm. So, alright. The next problem was when they went ahead and they designed the armors for the characters. I think they did an excellent job with the actual designs of the armors, but the way that they designed armors was completely fine as far as the mechanics were concerned in vanilla. But as soon as it got to the point where there was a gear score, that's when a really screwed up situation started happening. My hunter had a mediocre gear score because I had a few blue pieces. Not all my pieces were purple, and I didn't go for set match because it really didn't matter to me. I think I had 2 pieces of gear that had a set bonus that I wanted, and they both had stats that were actually pretty good. But my hunter kind of specialized into 3 different stats. One was stamina. So I could go ahead and have that extra HP, which would actually transfer to my turtle. Which was awesome. You know, I mean, it gave my turtles some extra survivability. Not a problem. And yes, I used a turtle. And yes, I used the turtle exceedingly well. And that's what allowed me to go ahead and solo a lot of dungeons. My melee weapon wasn't a sword, wasn't a dagger. It was a staff that had a load of agility on it, a load of stamina, and a load of intellect. I remember when I ended up getting it, it was a roll between me and one of the other characters in my guild who was playing as a druid. At first he got a little bit pissy about it. He's all like, that's a druid weapon, why are you rolling on that? I said, because I'm going to use it. Because all of these stats definitely help me out. I even ended up getting an enchant on it that gave it even more intellect, not agility. That allowed me to go into my shot rotations, which were extended shot rotations, without running out of mana and still being able to do quite a bit of damage. My critical ratios were through the roof, both for magic hit as well as physical. But the thing is I actually had a few pieces of druid armor on me that weren't specifically for druids, but you could definitely tell that they were initially designed for druids. I didn't necessarily go with chainmail, which a lot of hunters were going with chainmail because it gave a little bit of extra protection. I figured, I'm hardly ever getting hit. What do I need the extra protection for? If I can go ahead and get those stats, stamina transfers to my pet, making it so I'm not having to continuously heal my pet, even though I did because I had the mana for it. But having those stats allowed me to do more damage. It allowed me to do my job as a damage dealer much more efficiently. And it made sure that I always had mana in reserve. Not to mention, I had the aspect where it restored 10% of your mana every 5 seconds, and then like 1% for every hit that you did. You could go ahead and do that if you were in a real pinch with my running set. And I could go ahead and I could solo quite a bit, but whenever I would try to go ahead and do looking for group, it would say, sorry, your gear score isn't high enough. So it wasn't even the people saying it. It was the system saying, oh, your gear score isn't high enough. Fuck off until you get the gear that we want you to have. So I'd have to organize groups without the looking for group. Basically what it would be is I would go ahead and get a healer and a tank together, and they would go ahead, start up a group, look for a group. If we didn't have anyone really interested in the guild at that point, or not high enough level, or not geared out enough, and then at the end they would go ahead and manually invite me. They'd keep a damage dealer slot in there, because with me I could be a damage dealer. I could also be a secondary tank, or even a primary tank if really needed. And because of me being an alchemist, there were a few ways that I could actually heal other people. So, I mean, not in any real major way, but enough to, keep them alive long enough for that big heal to go off. Or enough time for the cleric to go ahead and, or whatever we were using for healer, whether it was a cleric or a druid. Very rarely a paladin. But we could go ahead and let them get some mana back. But that was a real hassle, and it was something that was placed into the game, and it was a very draconian thing, and I had that sinking feeling once they implemented that. I understand it to a degree. I know that they were wanting to make sure that people weren't trying to go in with crap gear and screwing people over. But here's the problem. That problem wouldn't have been there if they had just made it to where you weren't limited on your runs. Sitting there and doing one negative thing to cover another negative thing doesn't make it right. It just makes your game shit. That alone didn't make World of Warcraft shit, but as you can tell by all this kind of adding up, you kind of got a little bit of a shitstorm going. And I'm not even done with this yet. But I'm going to go ahead and end this video part right here. I'll go ahead and finish up the other one a little bit later. I'm a little bit tired. It's late at night. It's already like 1 or 2 in the morning. So I need to get some sleep. I'll talk to you later, YouTube. Again, if there's anything that I haven't mentioned yet, or if if maybe they've fixed a few of these things, by all means, let me know. But like I said, don't fanboy, or I'm not going to respond to you at all. Have a good night. Stay safe, everyone. I'll talk to you later.